I am Commander K. of what remains of the Lapinian Defense Force, and I am recording this so our descendants will know how close we came to extinction, and how salvation arrived wearing Stetsons and carrying swords. 2 cycles ago, we were an empire spanning 200 worlds. Our warrens housed trillions. Our quantum fleets darkened the skies of 1,000 alien cities. We bred, we expanded, we thrived, as has been our way since we first emerged from the deep burrows of our homeworld. The scourge awakened during our harvest festival. Our long-range sensors detected them first, ancient machines stirring from their millennia-long slumber in the void between galaxies. Our historians had found references to them in the ruins of dead civilizations, an automated cleansing system designed by some long-forgotten race to cull species that grew too numerous. We thought our technology would protect us. Our quantum shields, our plasma rays, our dark matter disruptors, they were the pinnacle of modern warfare. We had numbers. We had unity. We had the combined military might of 200 thriving colonies. It meant nothing. The scourge adapted to every weapon we deployed. Their swarm intelligence analyzed our tactics faster than our battle computers could generate new ones. Each defeat taught them. Each victory made them stronger. World by wound, warren by warren, they drove us back. Now, all that remains of our mighty empire cowers behind the quantum shields of Warren Prime, our last fortress world. Billions of my people are crammed into warrens meant for millions, our once proud ears pressed flat against our heads as we watch the scourge's ships darken our skies. Our shield generators are failing. The quantum matrices that power them are burning out faster than our engineers can replace them. The scourge's latest weapon, some kind of concentrated dark energy beam, is eating through our defenses layer by layer. I stand in the command center watching our tactical displays paint an increasingly hopeless picture. My fur, once the proud copper of the warrior caste, has grayed from stress. My ceremonial whiskers, which once twitched with the confidence of command, now droop with exhaustion. Shield Generator 7 is down. Lieutenant Vieira's voice carries the same fear I've heard in too many voices lately. Her long ears, normally held high in attention, are plastered against her back. Rerouting power from residential sectors. How many citizens in those sectors? I ask, though I already know the answer will haunt my dreams. 20 million, sir. But if we don't reinforce that shield, she doesn't need to finish. We've all seen what happens when the scourge breaches a sector. Their nights flow through like water, breaking down everything, metal, plastic, flesh, into raw materials for their endless expansion. I look at the strategic display, trying to find some hope in the swirling holographic patterns. Our last fleet, barely 50 ships, maintains a desperate holding pattern above the capital warren. Below ground, in chambers never meant to hold so many, the combined population of 200 worlds waits for salvation or death. We've sent out distress calls, of course. Automated beacons broadcasting on every frequency we know, crying out to the void for help. But in the 3 months since the scourge found Warren Prime, no one has answered. Why would they? Everyone has seen what happens to civilizations that stand against the swarm. Commander. Vieira's voice cracks with urgency, multiple shield generators showing critical stress. Grid failure estimated in 6 hours. 6 hours. After ruling the stars for 10,000 years, the Lapinian Empire has 6 hours left to exist. I reach up to touch my rank insignia, a quantum crystal carved with the histories of 1,000 battles. Battles we won. Battles that meant something. Not this slow, inevitable grind into extinction. Send all remaining power to the civilian sectors, I order, my voice steadier than I feel, and begin downloading our racial memory banks to the quantum arrays. If anyone finds this world after we're gone, they should know who we were. Vieira's paw hesitates over the controls. Sir, that's against protocol. Those arrays are meant for weapon systems. What use are weapons now? I ask softly. Better our history survives than our guns. She nods, her own whiskers trembling as she inputs the commands. Around us, the command center's lights dim as power is diverted. In the darkness, we can see the scourge ships more clearly through the armored viewport. Their hulls writhe with impossible geometries, each movement calculated by an intelligence that sees us as nothing more than an equation to be solved, a population variable to be reduced to zero. I think of my kits, huddled with millions of others in the deep warrens. They'll never know the glory of our empire. Never plant their paws on fresh soil. Never feel the pride of seeing Lapinian ships rising to new stars. All because we dared to be fruitful, to multiply, to reach for the heavens with all the passion our species could muster. Sir. Vira's voice is barely a whisper. The arrays are ready for the download. Should I? A new alarm cuts through the command center's gloom. For a moment, I think another shield has failed, but Vira's ears suddenly perk up as she studies her displays. Commander. Long-range sensors are detecting something, multiple quantum signatures approaching from the uncharted zones. But these readings, they're like nothing I've ever seen. I hop to her station, my own ears swiveling forward with desperate curiosity. The sensor readings make no sense, ships that seem to bend space itself, leaving trails of blue fire in their wake. And on their hulls, visible even at this distance, a single star blazes like a promise. We don't know it yet, but salvation is coming. And it's wearing spurs. The sensor readings made my whiskers twitch. In all my years commanding Lapinian warships, I'd never seen quantum signatures like these. They seemed to defy our most basic understanding of physics, leaving trails of blue fire that our instruments couldn't quite track. Multiple vessels, Vira reported, her long ears pivoting as she tried to make sense of the data. Small fleet, perhaps 20 ships. But sir, the energy readings, she trailed off, ears twitching in confusion. I understood her hesitation. According to our sensors, each ship was producing enough power to fuel a small sun. Yet they moved with an impossible grace, as if mass and inertia were mere suggestions rather than laws of nature. Magnification on the lead vessel, I ordered, trying to keep the desperate hope from my voice. We'd been abandoned by every ally we'd ever had. Why should these strangers be any different? The holoscreen flickered to life, showing a ship that made every engineer in the command center gasp. It was beautiful in a way that defied our aesthetic sensibilities. Smooth lines that somehow reminded me of the projectile weapons in our historical archives, but wrapped in technology that made our most advanced quantum drives look like children's toys. And there, emblazoned on its hull, was that lone star, simple, defiant, like a challenge thrown into the face of the void itself. Sir, one of our younger officers, his fur still carrying the dark stripes of adolescence, called out. The scourge is reacting to their presence. The swarm it's reforming. On our tactical displays, we watched as the endless tide of machine death that had been systematically destroying our shields suddenly shifted. The swarm was reorganizing, countless units flowing like liquid metal to face this new threat. That's when we received our first transmission from the unknown fleet. It came through on all frequencies, overriding our most sophisticated encryption as if it didn't exist. The voice that filled our command center carried something I'd never heard before, a curious drawl that somehow made even our advanced universal translators struggle. Warren Prime, this here's the Tens Alamo responding to your distress call. Appears why all have got yourselves a machine problem. The casualness of the statement, as if they were discussing a minor technical malfunction rather than an extinction-level event, made my ears stand straight up in shock. Be advised, the voice continued, we've got experience with these types of situations. Recommend you reinforce your ventral shields in the next, I'd say 3 minutes. Why 3 minutes? Vira asked before protocol could remind her she wasn't supposed to respond directly. The answer came with a chuckle that somehow carried both warmth and steel, because that's when we're going to introduce these machines to a little thing we call Texas ingenuity. We watched dumbfounded as the unknown fleet accelerated toward the Scourge Armada. Their movements defied everything we knew about space combat. Instead of forming up into proper combat formations, they seemed to be arranging themselves into some kind of pattern that looked almost decorative. Sir, our tactical officer reported, the Scourge swarm is fully engaged with the unknown fleet. They're ignoring us completely. It was true. For the first time in months, the endless attacks on our shields had ceased. The machine intelligence that had so efficiently taken apart our empire had apparently decided that these newcomers represented a greater threat. That's when we saw it, the moment that would be burned into my memory until the day I joined the great Warren in the sky. The lead ship, the one they'd called Alamo, began to glow with an inner light that our sensors simply couldn't quantify. Streams of blue fire poured from points on its hull that our tactical computers insisted were just decorative spurs. Energy spike. Vira's voice cracked with disbelief. It's by the first Warren, it's higher than anything in our records. The ship's power signature suddenly shifted into patterns that made our quantum physicists flatten their ears in denial. Space itself seemed to bend around their vessels. And for a moment, I swear I could hear something, a sound that didn't exist in vacuum. a song of defiance carried on waves of pure quantum energy. Warren Prime, the drawling voice came again. Why all might want to record this next part. Could be educational. What followed changed everything we thought we knew about warfare. But more than that, it introduced us to something our vast empire, for all its achievements, had never truly understood. The unstoppable force of Texas determination. I was there when they first transported into our command center. No warning, no request for clearance, just a series of quantum fluctuations that made our sensors squeal and protest, and suddenly they were there. Three figures that seemed to fill the room with their presence, if not their actual size. My first thought, I'm somewhat embarrassed to admit, was that they looked absurd. Here we were, in the middle of the most sophisticated battlefield in known space, and these beings were wearing what appeared to be archaic headgear and boots with jangling metal attachments. Even their powered armor, advanced as it clearly was, bore decorative elements that no sensible military would approve. Then one of them moved, and I understood how wrong I'd been. The quantum spurs on their boots left trails of blue fire with each step, somehow interfacing with our artificial gravity in ways that made our chief physicist's ears tie themselves in knots. Their armor, which I dismissed as unnecessarily ornate, seemed to bend light around it in ways that hurt my eyes if I looked too long. And the swords, those beautiful, impossible swords strapped to their backs, hummed with an energy that made my whiskers vibrate. Much obliged for the warm welcome, the tallest one said, touching the brim of his head covering, a Stetson I would later learn, with a gesture that somehow managed to be both courteous and coolly confident. Colonel James Walker of the Texas Knights, at your service. I drew myself up to my full height, a good 8 feet, and tried to match their composure. Commander K.E. of the Lapinian Defense Force, though I must point out that we didn't actually welcome you. You just appeared. Ain't that the truth? One of the other knights chuckled. But way we figured it. Formal protocols take a backseat when there's machines out there needing a good talking to. Before I could respond to this bizarre statement, our tactical officer's panicked voice cut through the command center. Sir, the scourge is I don't understand what I'm seeing. We all turned to the main display. The swarm that had been systematically destroying our civilization was behaving in ways we'd never seen. Individual units seemed to be malfunctioning, their perfectly coordinated movements dissolving into chaos. And at the center of this disruption, those strange ships with their Lone Star emblems were executing maneuvers that should have been physically impossible. That'll be the quantum harmonic disruption field, Colonel Walker said casually, as if discussing the weather. Found out a while back that these machine swarms don't take kindly to certain frequencies, especially when they're carried on good old-fashioned Texas steel. My ears swiveled in confusion. Texas steel. But your ships are clearly using technology far beyond now, Commander. He interrupted gently. Don't go making the same mistake them machines are making. See, that's the beauty of it. They can't figure out how we're beating them because they're looking for advanced technology. But sometimes he drew his sword in a motion too smooth to follow, and the air itself seemed to sing. Sometimes the old ways work best. I stared at the blade. It looked like it had been forged by traditional methods, yet the quantum readings it was giving off broke several laws of physics I'd learned in the academy. You see, the third knight spoke up, her voice carrying that same curious drawl. Way back when we were just starting to reach for the stars, we figured out something important. The more advanced the technology, the more vulnerable it is to being hacked, corrupted, or turned against you. But you can't hack tradition, can't corrupt conviction. And you sure as hell can't turn Texas spirit against itself. So we took our traditions, Colonel Walker continued, our steel, our determination, and we found ways to make them work out here in the black. These swords, each one's got a quantum matrix built right into the molecular structure of the blade. Been passed down through generations of knights, each one adding their own experiences, their own fights, their own spirit to the pattern. As if to demonstrate, he swung his sword in a casual arc. Where the blade passed, reality itself seemed to ripple, and 3 of our supposedly unhackable tactical displays suddenly came back online, clearer than they'd been since the scourge first attacked. That's impossible, our chief engineer whispered, ears flat against his head. Lot of folks have said that about Texas over the years. Colonel Walker smiled, usually right before we showed them otherwise. He sheathed his sword and turned to me with an expression that mixed determination and what I could swear was amusement. Now, how about you tell us everything you know about these machines? Because way I see it, they're about to learn what happens when you mess with folks under Texas protection. Under your protection. My whiskers twitched in confusion. But we never, Weil sent out a distress call, he said simply. We answered. Far as we're concerned, that makes you our neighbors. And in Texas, his quantum spurs flared with blue fire as he turned to face the tactical display showing the approaching swarm. Well, in Texas, we look after our neighbors. Looking at him in that moment, this strange being who combined ancient tradition with impossible technology, who spoke of neighborly duties in the same breath as quantum harmonics, I felt something I hadn't experienced since the scourge first appeared: hope. Besides, he added, his voice carrying a hint of steel beneath the friendly drawl, these machines seem to think they get to decide who lives and who dies based on how many kids folks have. He touched the brim of his Stetson, and I swear the temperature in the command center dropped several degrees. We don't cotton to that kind of thinking in Texas. The Knights didn't waste any time. Within hours of their arrival, they'd converted our largest training warren into what they called a forge space. I watched, ears twitching in fascination, as they set up equipment that somehow managed to look both ancient and impossibly advanced at the same time. First thing you got to understand, Colonel Walker explained as he heated up what looked like a traditional forge, though its heat came from contained quantum reactions rather than any conventional fuel, is that these swords ain't just weapons. They're history books written in steel and quantum matrices. I watched as he pulled a blank quantum chip from a case at his hip. It was smaller than my smallest claw, yet according to our sensors, it contained more computing power than our entire defense mainframe. With movements that spoke of centuries of tradition, he began to integrate it into the molecular structure of a sword blade that one of my officers had provided from our ceremonial armory. Each knight's blade, he continued, his quantum spurs leaving trails of blue fire as he worked, carries the combined combat experience of every warrior who's ever wielded it. When we forge a new one or modify an existing blade like this one, we're not just making a weapon. We're adding to a legacy. Around us, other knights were working with selected members of my security force, teaching them techniques that made my scientific officers' ears twist in confusion. They called it quantum harmonics, but it was unlike any technology we'd ever encountered. See these scourge machines, the female knight Marza, she'd told us to call her, explained to a group of our warriors they think they've got everything figured out. Their swarm intelligence adapts to any weapon and any tactic. But they can't adapt to something they can't understand. And they sure can't understand Texas spirit encoded into quantum matrices. She demonstrated a simple sword movement that somehow generated a disruption field strong enough to crash every piece of electronic equipment within 20 feet. The key ain't in the technology, she drawled, helping one of our officers replicate the motion. It's in the conviction behind it. Why, all got to mean it when you swing that blade. I moved closer to Colonel Walker, watching as he carefully etched microscopic patterns into the quantum chip before integration. I don't understand, I admitted, my whiskers drooping slightly. How can conviction affect quantum mechanics? He smiled, never taking his eyes off his work. Same way a mother's love can lift a hover car off her child, Commander. Some things in this universe don't play by the regular rules. The scourge, they see everything as math, as probabilities and patterns. But you can't calculate spirit, can't quantify determination, can't predict what somebody'll do when they're fighting for their home, their family, their way of life. Each of these chips, he continued, holding up the tiny piece of technology that glowed with inner fire, gets encoded with more than just combat data. It carries memories, emotions, the very essence of what it means to be a knight. When we swing these blades, we ain't just hitting the enemy with quantum disruption fields. We're hitting them with the combined will of generations of Texas knights. I watched as he completed the integration, the blade taking on a subtle blue sheen that reminded me of the fire from their quantum spurs. But we're not knights, I pointed out. We're Lapinians. How can your traditions work for us? Son, he said, testing the blade's balance with practiced ease. Tradition ain't about where you're from. It's about what you believe in. Your people got spirit. We've seen it in how you've held out against impossible odds. You got determination, hell. You've kept billions alive against an enemy that's destroyed whole galaxies. All we're doing is showing you how to focus that spirit, that determination, into something the machines can't process. Around us, more of my officers were beginning to get the hang of it. Their practice swings were generating smaller versions of the disruption fields we'd seen from the Knight's blades. Each successful attempt was met with enthusiastic encouragement from their Texas instructors. Besides, Colonel Walker added with a grin, way I see it, why all got something special that might just make you better at this than we are. He pointed to my ears, which instinctively swiveled toward him. Your people can literally feel quantum fluctuations. Been watching how your ears and whiskers react to our equipment. You don't just see what we're doing, you can sense it. He handed me the modified blade, and I nearly dropped it in shock. The quantum harmonics singing through its structure set my whiskers buzzing in patterns I'd never experienced before. It felt right, in a way I couldn't explain. That their blade, he said softly, now carries a bit of Texas in its heart. But it's still a Lapinian sword. It'll remember your people's courage, your warrior's sacrifice, your species' determination to survive against all odds. And when you swing it, his quantum spurs flared as he stepped back. Well, let's just say the machines are about to learn that Texas ain't the only place in the universe where folks know how to stand their ground. As if to emphasize his point, one of my younger officers successfully executed a complex series of movements with her newly modified blade. The resulting quantum cascade took out half the training Warren's lighting system. Sorry, she called out, ears drooping in embarrassment. Don't apologize, Marza laughed. If you ain't breaking things while you're learning, you ain't trying hard enough. Now let's work on focusing that disruption field. You want to save the light breaking for the scourge. I looked down at the sword in my paws, watching the subtle play of quantum energies along its length. In its surface I could see reflections of both traditions, the proud history of the Lapinian ceremonial blades, now merged with the indomitable spirit of the Texas Knights. One more thing, Colonel Walker said, his voice taking on a serious tone. When you swing that blade, remember, you ain't just fighting for survival anymore. You're fighting for something bigger. Something the machines can never understand. And what's that? I asked, ears forward in curiosity. He touched the brim of his Stetson, and every quantum spur in the room flared in unison. Freedom, Commander. The freedom to live, to grow, to be fruitful and multiply without some ancient programming telling you when you've had enough. That's what Texas has always fought for, and that's what we're fixing to teach these machines about. Looking around the training Warren, watching my people begin to grasp not just the techniques but the spirit behind them, I finally understood. The Knights hadn't just brought us weapons or technology. They'd brought us hope. And hope, it turns out, hits harder than any quantum disruption field. They came at dawn, or what passes for dawn on a fortress world under siege. The Scourge had finally adapted to the Knights' initial quantum disruption tactics, reconfiguring their swarm into new patterns that our sensors could barely track. The machine intelligence had done what it always did, learn, it evolved, prepared to counter whatever we threw at it. Only this time, that's exactly what we wanted. Remember, Colonel Walker's voice carried across our combined communications network, his drawl somehow steady even as the void beyond our shields filled with countless machines. Let them think they've got us figured out. Let them think they can predict what's coming. I stood with my newly trained warriors, our modified blades humming with combined Lapinian and Texan quantum signatures. Our ears twitched in perfect synchronization as we sensed the approaching harmonics of the swarm's attack patterns. Behind us, billions of our people huddled in the deep warrens, waiting to see if this last, desperate gambit would save them. Now, Walker's command cracked across the void like Texas lightning. Every quantum spur in the Knights' formation flared at once, creating a cascading web of blue fire across Warren Prime's surface. The Scourge's first wave hit this network and stuttered. Not the complete disruption they'd seen before, but enough to make the machine intelligence pause, recalculate. That moment of hesitation was all we needed. The Knights moved like they'd practiced this dance for generations, which in a way they had. Their swords left trails of quantum fire that our sensors registered as mathematical impossibilities. Each strike wasn't just hitting the machines, it was disrupting the very equations they used to define reality. You all remember what we taught you. Marza's voice rang out as she cut through a cluster of scourge units, her blades singing harmonics that made my whiskers vibrate. Don't just swing the sword, mean it. My warriors needed no further encouragement. We'd spent days learning not just the techniques but the spirit behind them. Our ears and whiskers gave us advantages even the Knights didn't have. We could literally feel the quantum harmonics, adjust our strikes to match the resonant frequencies that hurt the machines most. A young officer named K-Till demonstrated this perfectly. Her ears twitched as she sensed an approaching wave of nanites, and her blade moved in a pattern that combined traditional Lapinian swordplay with Texan quantum harmonics. The resulting disruption field turned 1,000 machines into so much cosmic dust. Hot damn, one of the Knights shouted. That's better than a rattlesnake in a boot factory. I didn't understand the reference, but the approval in his voice was clear. The battle quickly became something our tactical computers simply couldn't process. The Scourge would adapt to one frequency only to be hit by another. They'd predict one pattern only to be disrupted by something their logic circuits couldn't comprehend. Every time their swarm intelligence thought it had us figured out, we'd show them something new. Because that was the true genius of the Knight strategy. They hadn't just taught us their techniques, they'd shown us how to make them our own. Each Lapinian warrior was adding their own spirit, their own determination to the quantum matrices in their blades. The machines couldn't adapt because every strike carried something unique, something that couldn't be reduced to mere mathematics. I found myself fighting alongside Colonel Walker as we defended the main shield generator. His quantum spurs left burning trails across the deck plating as he moved with that impossible grace, his sword cutting through swarm units like they were nothing but bad dreams. "You're getting it now, Commander," he called out as my blade dispersed a cluster of nanites. "Feel that spirit singing through the quantum matrix. That's generations of warriors, human and Lapinian both, telling these machines they picked the wrong fight." He was right. I could feel it, not just with my whiskers and ears, but with something deeper. Each swing of my blade carried the weight of my people's determination, their refusal to be exterminated by cold machine logic. And alongside that, bound into the very molecular structure of the sword, was something else. That uniquely Texan spirit that had somehow crossed the vast gulf between our species to remind us what it meant to stand and fight. The battle raged for hours, though time seemed to lose meaning in that quantum-wreathed chaos. The scourge kept coming, kept adapting, kept trying to solve the equation of our defiance. But you can't quantify spirit, can't calculate determination, can't predict what a people will do when they're fighting with borrowed steel and borrowed courage that's somehow become their own. The turning point came when our sensors detected the swarm's primary control node, the nexus of their distributed intelligence. It was pulling back, attempting to retreat and process what it had encountered. The machines, for the first time in their ancient existence, had found something they couldn't understand. "Oh no, you don't." Colonel Walker's voice carried that peculiar mix of politeness and steel. "Ain't no running from this fight." He touched the brim of his Stetson, and every quantum spur in the combined Texan-Lapinian force flared with blue fire. "Commander K. Eat, care to help me demonstrate some genuine cross-cultural cooperation?" I knew exactly what he meant. My warriors moved into formation around the knights, our ears and whiskers tracking quantum harmonics with preternatural precision. When the order came, we struck as one, human and Lapinian steel and spirit, tradition and innovation. The quantum cascade that followed wrote itself into the history of two peoples. Every blade swung in perfect harmony, generating overlapping disruption fields that the machines couldn't hope to adapt to. You can't predict the unpredictable, can't calculate the infinite variables of spirit, courage, and determination. Above all, you can't quantify what happens when Texas gets its dander up. The swarm's control node didn't just fail, it experienced what the Knights later called a complete metaphysical breakdown. The machines hadn't just been beaten by superior technology or tactics. They'd been confronted with something their ancient programming couldn't process, the combined spirit of two warrior cultures, encoded in quantum matrices and delivered with the kind of conviction that makes the laws of physics sit up and take notice. As the remaining swarm units fell into disarray, their controlling intelligence shattered beyond repair, Colonel Walker turned to me with a grin that somehow managed to be both fierce and friendly. "See that, Commander? That's what happens when you mess with Texas." He paused, looking at my warriors with obvious pride. "Or its friends." My whiskers twitched with barely contained emotion as I watched the scourge ships drift lifeless in orbit. We had done it. My people would survive, would thrive, would continue to multiply and reach for the stars. And we had learned something more valuable than any technology, sometimes the oldest traditions, carried across the stars and shared between species, hit harder than any weapon. Because spirit, it turns out, transcends even quantum mechanics. Especially if that spirit comes with spurs and a drawl. The aftermath of our first major victory revealed something fascinating about why the Knights' methods had worked so well. I stood in our main research warren with Colonel Walker and our chief quantum physicist V. Wren, whose ears hadn't stopped twitching since she began analyzing the battle data. "It's beautiful," she whispered, her whiskers vibrating as she studied the quantum readings. The scourge's adaptive algorithms, they literally couldn't process what was happening. Every time they thought they'd identified a pattern, the quantum matrices in the blades would shift into something completely new. "Ain't just the quantum matrices," Walker said, his spurs leaving small trails of blue fire as he moved to examine a holographic replay of the battle. "It's what's encoded in them. See, machines like these, They think everything can be reduced to mathematics, patterns, probabilities. But the data stored in your quantum matrices, V-Ren's ears perked forward in excitement. It's not just combat information, is it? It's humanity. Walker finished with a smile. Generations of it. Every knight who's ever wielded one of these blades didn't just leave their combat experience in the quantum matrix. They left their hopes, their fears, their determination, their very spirit. I watched the holographic replay, seeing how our combined forces had moved together. The knight's traditional techniques, amplified by our natural sensitivity to quantum fluctuations, had created something the Scourge had never encountered in their eons of existence. Look here, V-Ren pointed to a particular sequence. When the machines adapted to the initial disruption patterns, they thought they had it figured out. Their swarm intelligence had calculated every possible variation of the quantum harmonics. But then they ran into something they couldn't calculate. I said, understanding dawning. The human spirit encoded in the knight's blades combined with our own unique abilities. Walker nodded, touching the brim of his Stetson. Y'all's warriors didn't just learn our techniques, you made them your own. Added your own spirit to the quantum matrices. Every time your ears twitched, every time your whiskers sensed a harmonic pattern, you were adding something new to the equation. Something unpredictable. V-Ren's analysis confirmed it. The Scourge's adaptive algorithms had been designed to counter any weapon, any technology they encountered. But the quantum matrices in our blades weren't just technology. They were living history, constantly evolving, each strike carrying not just disruption fields, but the combined will of two warrior cultures. See these patterns? V-Ren highlighted a series of quantum fluctuations. When K-Till made that remarkable attack run, her natural sensitivity to quantum harmonics allowed her to instinctively adjust the blade's output. The matrix didn't just respond, it learned, adapted, incorporated her unique perspective into its stored knowledge. Making it even harder for the machines to predict, Walker added with obvious pride. Can't calculate spirit, can't quantify determination, and sure as sunrise can't predict what happens when Texas know-how meets Lapinian instinct. Our tactical computers were still trying to process exactly how we'd achieved victory. The mathematics involved in combining Texas quantum harmonics with Lapinian sensory capabilities had actually crashed 3 of our most advanced AI systems. They, like the Scourge, simply couldn't compute the infinite variables of spirit and determination. But what happens when they come back? I asked, my ears flattening slightly. The Scourge has always returned stronger, having learned from each defeat. Walker's smile carried the peculiar mix of confidence and steel I'd come to associate with the knights. Let them come. Every battle teaches our blades too. Every strike adds new patterns, new spirit, new determination to the quantum matrices. And now, he gestured to where my warriors were practicing their newly developed techniques. Now those matrices carry something the machines will never understand, the combined spirit of Texas and Warren Prime. V-Ren's whiskers twitched as she calculated something. The mathematical possibilities are infinite. With our natural quantum sensitivity guiding the harmonics, and the human spirit encoded in the matrices providing unpredictable variables, means we got ourselves a genuine advantage, Walker finished. One that can't be countered by mere machine logic. Because every time they think they've got us figured out, we'll show them something new, I said, watching my warriors practice. Their movements combined the precision of Lapinian swordplay with the unmistakable flair of Texas determination. Each strike carried something unique, something that couldn't be reduced to mere data. Exactly. Walker's spurs flared as he turned to face the tactical display showing the retreating Scourge forces. They wanted to play by the numbers, tried to calculate when a species had grown too numerous. But they never factored in what happens when folks decide to stand together. Never calculated what happens when Texas spirit meets Lapinian courage. V-Ren's ears suddenly stood straight up as her instruments detected something. Colonel. The quantum matrices in our modified blades, they're synchronizing with each other, creating harmonic patterns I've never seen before. We watched in amazement as the blades began to hum in perfect harmony, their quantum signatures merging into something that made my whiskers tingle. Texas tradition and Lapinian instinct bound together in steel and spirit, creating something entirely new. Well now, Walker drawled, ain't that just prettier than a sunset over Austin? Looks like your people and ours just wrote ourselves a whole new chapter in the history of both our worlds. Looking at those harmonizing blades, feeling the quantum matrices sing with combined human and Lapinian spirit, I understood what the Scourge never could. Some equations can't be solved with cold logic. Some forces can't be calculated or predicted. And when Texas determination meets Lapinian instinct, backed by quantum-enhanced steel and generations of shared spirit, well, that's the kind of math that makes even ancient machine gods think twice. 10 cycles have passed since the Battle of Warren Prime. I sit in what we now call the Lone Star Warren, surrounded by young Lapinian kits whose ears twitch with excitement as I prepare to tell the story once again. Above us, through the reinforced viewport, the first graduating class of the Joint Texas Lapinian Night Academy practices their quantum blade techniques against the backdrop of stars. Elder K. Eat, one of the youngest kits, pipes up, her whiskers quivering with anticipation. Is it true that you fought alongside the first Texas Knights who came to save us? I touch the quantum sword at my hip, the same one Colonel Walker helped forge all those cycles ago. Its matrix hums with memories, both human and Lapinian, a testament to the partnership that changed both our peoples forever. It's true, little one. Though save isn't quite the right word. The Knights didn't just save us, they showed us how to save ourselves. They taught us that sometimes the oldest traditions, carried across the stars and shared between friends, are stronger than any weapon our enemies can devise. The kit's ears all swivel forward as I draw my blade, its quantum harmonics singing in frequencies that only our people can fully appreciate. The human instructors at the academy say we've added whole new dimensions to their techniques thanks to our natural sensitivity to quantum fluctuations. Look there, I gesture to where a young human knight in training is practicing alongside her Lapinian counterpart. Their quantum spurs leave matching trails of blue fire across the training ground's deck plates. See how they move together. That's the legacy of what happened here 10 cycles ago. Two warrior cultures, learning that we're stronger together than apart. The rebuilt Warren Prime has become something neither species could have imagined before. Our Warrens now incorporate traditional Texas architectural elements, while the human quarters sport unmistakably Lapinian touches. The quantum forges run day and night, crafting blades that carry the combined spirits of both peoples. But what about the scourge? Another kid asks, ears twitching nervously. Could they come back? I smile, remembering Colonel Walker's words from all those cycles ago. Let them try. Every knight's blade, whether wielded by human or Lapinian, carries something they can never understand, something that grows stronger with each passing generation. As if to emphasize my point, a new group of graduates emerges from the academy's main entrance. Humans in their distinctive Stetsons walking alongside Lapinians whose ceremonial ear wraps bear the same Lone Star emblem. Each carries a sword forged in traditions older than their species' first meeting, yet made new by their ongoing partnership. You see, I continue, watching pride shine in the young one's eyes. The Knights taught us something more valuable than just how to fight. They taught us that true strength isn't in numbers or technology. It's in the unbroken line of tradition, in the spirit that refuses to be quantified or controlled. I activate my blade's quantum matrix, letting the kits feel the harmonics with their sensitive whiskers. In this sword's memory banks are the combined experiences of 15 generations of Texas Knights and 10 cycles of Lapinian warriors. Every battle, every victory, every moment of determination in the face of impossible odds, all preserved in quantum matrices that sing with the spirit of both our peoples. The youngest kit's ears perk up as she catches a particular harmonic resonance. It's singing the eyes of Texas, she exclaims, recognizing the quantum pattern that all academy students learn in their first year. That it is, little one, because we learned that some songs transcend species. Some traditions, when shared with an open heart, become stronger for the sharing. Through the viewport, we watch as the graduates begin their final exhibition. Quantum spurs flare in perfect synchronization, human and Lapinian moving together in patterns that would make those ancient machines' logic circuits freeze in confusion. Their blades leave trails of blue fire across the void, writing new chapters in a story that began with a desperate distress call and a drawled response. Remember this, young ones, I say, sheathing my sword as the quantum harmonics fade. When the Knights first arrived, they told us that the eyes of Texas were upon us. Now, 10 cycles later, those eyes have become our eyes too. Their traditions have become our traditions, made stronger by the sharing. A cheer goes up from the graduation ceremony as the new Knights complete their demonstration. In orbit above us, the combined Texas-Lapinian defense fleet stands ready, each ship bearing both the Lone Star and the traditional symbols of our people. Not that we've needed them much. Word has spread across the galaxy about what happens when you threaten a world under joint Texas-Lapinian protection. But what about the sword? Elder K. One of the older kits asks. Will you pass it on to the next generation? I smile, feeling the quantum matrix pulse warmly at my side. That's the beauty of it, young one. These blades don't just get passed down, they grow. Every warrior who wields them adds their own spirit, their own determination. Human or Lapinian doesn't matter. The quantum matrices don't care about species, they care about heart. As if in response, the sword hums a harmonic that makes every kit's whiskers twitch in appreciation. In its quantum-encoded memories are battles won and lost, friendships forged across the stars, and the unshakable certainty that some forces in the universe can't be calculated or controlled. Because in the end, I tell them, watching the next generation of knights prepare to take their oaths, that's what the knights really taught us. It's not about the weapons or the technology. It's about the spirit that drives them, the determination that refuses to be measured or contained. I touch my ceremonial whiskers, now gray with age, but still sensitive enough to feel the quantum harmonics singing through our fortress world. And when you combine Texas spirit with Lapinian heart, well, the kits finish the phrase with me, their ears high and proud. That's the kind of math that makes even ancient machine gods think twice. Above us, the stars shine on a legacy neither species could have imagined before that desperate day 10 cycles ago. In the quantum forges, new blades are being born. In the Academy warrens, new traditions are being made. And in the hearts of two warrior peoples, a truth has been written that no force in the universe can erase. Some traditions are stronger when shared. Some spirits burn brighter together than apart. And the eyes of Texas, now joined by the whiskers of Warren Prime, are still watching over the stars, ready to remind anyone who forgets that some equations can't be solved by cold logic alone. They require spirit, determination, and maybe just a touch of that peculiar magic that happens when Texas meets the stars. Quantum spurs optional, but highly recommended. Thank you so much for listening to this story. I hope you enjoyed it. Be sure to leave it a like and to subscribe if you'd like to see more. Feel free to comment and share it as well. With all that said, go on and check out the video in the top left. I think you might like it.